formidable, formidable distinguished professor emeritus at New Paltz, who's written dozens of books on Haudenosaunee history and just real archive rat. And no one pushes Larry around. And at the time, Chancellor King, a different Chancellor King, and incredibly not the most destructive Chancellor King, approached Larry Hauptman and basically accused of an illegal conflict of interest because Larry, like I was as a untenured assistant professor at the time, were doing work on behalf of indigenous tribes related to our own research in litigation against the state. And in fact, one of Chancellor King's counselors or lawyers at the time had issued a statement that no historian in the state in the SUNY system was allowed to talk to any indigenous person. I never knew about this. My college president, Chris, at the time, a guy named Chris Dahl, who's just kind of set the standard for college presidents. He never passed it along because he just thought it was so absurd that nothing like this could ever. So I never knew I was, technically violating Chancellor King's rules. But once Larry went to bat with this, fought this guy and argued this guy, and he did what historians do when they're confronted by injustice and opposition. He wrote about it and, aired out just what Chancellor King had said and talked about this legitimate threat to academic and intellectual freedom. And, I was untenured at the time, and I still feel very grateful to Larry for sticking up for a number of us who were untenured at the time and really kind of going to bat and not only defending us, but defending the entire enterprise of doing research. And I would throw, for the people interested in museums and collections as well, right? We're all trying to teach in various ways. We're using different means to do it, but we're all involved in the same business. We're all trying to increase public knowledge about what is at times a difficult past. And it's just, it just seems to me that it's just my experience has been over the years is that state's a huge thing. It's got lots of tentacles, and 99.9% of the state probably could not care less what we're doing. And in that sense, we have all the freedom of a completely neglected child to create and do all sorts of things. That said, I mean, I really think it's the obligation of a scholar to ask questions and to answer those questions, right? History it's not a science, but it is a discipline, right? It is the study of continuity and change measured across time and space in people's institutions and cultures. And in telling that story, we dig like badgers for answers, right? And so, I make many trips back and forth along the Thruway to the archives in Albany or to Onondaga for the project I've been working on later to answer these questions. And who our employer is really shouldn't affect us. I'm saying this in an idealized way, shouldn't affect the work we do. And the way to deal with this kind of opposition that we might get, and I certainly get it if I write a blog post or I write an op-ed in the paper. I've kind of stopped doing that because I get too much, people still read newspaper editorials. Some of them get pissed off enough to go get an envelope and a stamp and write a letter. It's like, boy, man, you must have been steamed. But the need, I think, is for confrontation, for mixing it up, for urgent Socratic dialogue. And if this history makes people uncomfortable, and I think we can see, if not in New York, across the country, there are these concerted campaigns to silence discussions of certain types of history. The best answer is to confront it and challenge it. And to me, that's an obligation we have. And I think it's long past time for a more critical look at the revolution, right? I mean, even the new left writing histories of the revolution in the 1970s, essentially operate on the assumption the revolution was a good thing, right? It was better to be an American citizen than a British subject. But it's also worth talking about how, you know, our colonial overlords abolished slavery before we did, and they managed to do it without a 4.5 year long war that killed 650,000 people. So what really is the connection between the revolution and liberty, right? That language at the bottom end of the Declaration of Independence, where Thomas Jefferson talks about Dunmore's War and the governor of Virginia stirring up the slaves, the domestic insurrection, and the merciless Indian savages, whose only known model of war, I'm paraphrasing here, is the indiscriminate destruction of all ages, and you know what I'm saying. That's fundamental to forming the identity of the American revolutionary movement, right? You got these 13 steps, these states, these 13 clocks that have to beat all of this. And one way to bring those people together was by ginning up fears of enslaved people and indigenous people, right? Robert Parkinson, who wrote this great book about it, in an interview, he's saying, like, you know, if the 10 of us here had to agree on, you know, if we had a discussion of who our favorite football player was, we might have 10 different answers, right? And my apologies to any of the Albany folks, because you may be divided in this, but in Western New York, there's 10 of us in Western New York. On the other hand, if we have to pick one football player we hate, we'd all agree it'd be easy, right? It'd be Tom Brady, right? We all, everyone in Western New York, even though he's retired, now we can hate him because he's a shitty announcer, right? And Parkinson's argument is it was far easier in the revolutionary movement to pull people together around what they hated than what they were for, right? It was one way to pull all the states together into this movement. And I think that's fundamental to understanding the revolution, that this wasn't, it may have been a new birth of freedom for property owning white men, but it was the beginning of a nightmare for indigenous peoples. And that nightmare is just as much American history as is this triumphant emergence of the new American Republic. And so that's where I would go. I mean, I don't want to keep going, or I mean, there's other people here and they may have things to say, but it just seems to me that we need to confront, we need to engage how we can. And for museum people, it's easier than it is for me, in a sense, right? You guys, and for high school teachers, you guys engage every day. It's relatively easy for an academic historian like myself to avoid this kind of stuff. It's very easy for an academic historian like me to write for the half dozen people who really care about our issue. And that just seems to me historical malpractice, given the crises that we continue to face in this country.
Amen.
So I'll leave it at that.
Sounds good. Leah, we are good with the recorded part. We can switch to not recording.